This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The opinions on this program are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WPSL. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. Legal questions? Ask a lawyer. Give us a call at 340-1590, 340-1590 here at the studios of WPSL. And Ask a Lawyer with your host, Attorney Stuart M. Address.
Good morning, Treasure Coast, and welcome to Ask a Lawyer. Give us a call at 340-1590. I'm certainly willing to answer any of your questions on any of the topics you might have. But we, as always, have a topic or two we'll try to discuss, and anybody who happens to call with a different question is welcome. I need to start today, honestly, with my sympathies for the victims and their families of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, for the shooting that occurred during Shabbat services last week. It was the largest anti-Semitic shooting and incident causing death and injury in American history. That goes back quite a long time, almost 250 years. So one of the things that in my congregation, Eitz Chaim, which, by the way, means Tree of Life. And when I heard of the synagogue where the shooting occurred in Pittsburgh, and I heard it was called the Tree of Life, I immediately had a lump in my throat, knowing that while we call our congregation Eitz Chaim, its meaning is Tree of Life. And so there was, even if in the most peripheral way, some connection to me. So last Sunday, on a very spur-of-the-moment short notice that began at 3 in the morning, we had a memorial service that afternoon on Sunday. And in attendance, not only were members of our congregation and some other Jewish members of the community, but we had a number of members of various Christian churches. And we had a couple of the leaders, and I think if I counted correctly, 7 congregants of the local mosque, Muslim members. So we all sat there together as part of a memorial service. A beautiful one. And quite interestingly, not that I was unaware of it, but when one of the leaders of the mosque got up to make some remarks and give a Muslim prayer. When translated into English, it was almost identical to the Jewish prayer which the rabbi had given. And the point that I took from that, which I mentioned in some of my remarks as president of the congregation, is that it takes the willingness to get to know each other, to learn about each other, to engage in activities together, Christian, Jew, Muslim, anything else. Because the more you learn about each other, the more I personally believe you learn that more people have things in common than differ. And the harder it is to dislike each other. And if you don't dislike each other, in fact, if you begin to actually like each other, then acts of violence become much less. Now, that doesn't mean that the crazies aren't still going to exist. It doesn't mean that somebody that is determined to wreak havoc and engage in violence and terrorism can be stopped by that type of activity. But it does mean that distrust, suspicion, dislike can be minimized and very often reversed by just getting together and learning about each other. Now, tonight and tomorrow morning, my congregation will be holding also special memorial remembrance services, as will almost every synagogue across the nation. It's a special Shabbat vigil. I think I had it called here. It's the actual technical name that was given to it was Solidarity Shabbat, a Shabbat of peace. And Jews across the nation are invited this weekend to their temples, and non-Jews as well. And that point is made very clearly. And the fact that we had so many at our own temple on Sunday makes the point very clearly. Everybody is welcome, not only at our temple tonight and tomorrow morning, but everywhere throughout the country. You do not have to be Jewish to mourn the loss of life. You do not have to be Christian to mourn the loss when there are shootings at churches. And you do not have to be Muslim, for example, to mourn the loss of the Muslim temple, the mosque in Fort Pierce, when it was burned shortly after the Orlando shootings. These are the times especially that we need to come together. So how is this an Ask a Lawyer type topic? I mean, it's a personal topic, but how is it an Ask a Lawyer topic? Well, one of the things that you have all found out, those who are regular listeners, is that a good part of my practice is discrimination and civil rights. And I guess my personal and my professional lives intersect there, in that I don't just practice discrimination and civil rights law. I believe that everybody is entitled to equal rights, to fair treatment. And maybe, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Maybe that stems from my personal philosophy that the more we get to know each other, the less we may dislike each other, and the more we may in fact like each other. Or maybe the practice of that area of the law led to a greater sense of that in my personal life. Actually, it doesn't even matter. And one quick story, I see my mother is listening from a hospital where somebody in my family, I won't say who because they may get upset, had some surgery the other day. She told us a story, and I'm sure I will get it slightly wrong, but I'm sure I'll get the salient points correct. And hey, maybe she'll call me and correct me a little bit. Way back in the good old 70s, when I was growing up in New Jersey, my mother went to work in a factory as a bookkeeper, and there was a woman there who could not stand her. Turned out she couldn't stand her because my mother was Jewish. She wasn't aware of any other Jew that she'd ever actually met. She had been grown up in the South. And she had been taught and raised however she was raised. But the longer my mother worked there, slightly the less the dislike existed. And at one point, my mother invited her to our Passover Seder service at our home. And she came. And I don't know if it was the service itself or if it occurred slightly before or slightly after, but I do know this, that my mother and this woman became very close friends for many, 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 many years. And to me, that was just a perfect illustration way back in my childhood days of how taking the opportunity to learn about one person of another faith, another national origin, another color, might lead you to have a different viewpoint as to not only them, but maybe even though it's stereotypical, the entire race or religion or national origin that perhaps you might have had a different viewpoint of previously. So I'll try to close this topic before we get to a more legal topic by saying, please, everybody is invited. I'm sure the rabbi is going to mention it on Ask a Rabbi following this show. Tonight at 7:30 at Congregation H. Chaim, 540 Northwest University Boulevard, Suite 102. It is across from Met Stadium. If you actually go to the entrance, into the parking lot at Met Stadium on University, 10 feet past that entrance, You make a right into a building park, and we're right there in the front in Suite 102. You're invited. I know we're going to have some very special guests tonight and tomorrow. I believe tonight we are going to have the Democratic candidate for Congress from our district, Lauren Baer. I know that Congressman Mast has been invited. We have not heard from him yet. I certainly hope he chooses to come. I think it's not only a great opportunity to memorialize and honor the sacrifices and the victims of what occurred in Pittsburgh, but it's a great opportunity to get together within your own district with Jews, Christians, and Muslims. I don't know what politician could really pass that up.
Well, the timing is everything too, right?
And that's the Friday before the election. I don't know who can pass that up.
Yeah.
So I hope Congressman Mast chooses to show up, and I hope that maybe the presence of Ms. Baer is not deterring him. But we'll see, I guess. We'll find out. And again, Saturday morning at 10:30, we'll also be having a similar memorial service. I don't know precisely who will be there, but everybody's invited, and really, we would like to see you. And if you just want to meet me in person, if I'm a celebrity, find out who is Ask a Lawyer, come on down. And if you want to meet if you listen to Ask a Rabbi and you want to meet the rabbi,
I was thinking maybe in the next show during Ask a Rabbi, she'll have more details for us too.
she might. I know that we have been texting, and the contact we have in our congregation who knows Congressman Mast, I've suggested that he might want to encourage the congressman to make a decision and advise us, because the publicity that he can get on the radio that he's coming is right now. And if he misses it on my show, maybe they'll be there for Ask a Rabbi. All right, so I truly, I hope that generally those who are listening to me, and I know I do have a mixed audience skewing somewhat Republican, somewhat conservative.
You'd be surprised.
Well, maybe it's just the Democrats aren't as vocal when they call. But I believe from the bottom of my heart, folks, the more you get to know people, the more you're likely going to like them. Certainly the more you're going to realize that we do have more in common than separates us. I will tell you this before I try to get back to the topic I had planned. And I mentioned this too in my remarks on last Sunday. Recently, very recently, I unfortunately had to go to a funeral mass for a dear friend who passed away way, way too early. And first of all, there was nothing said at that mass, with the exception of the word Jesus, that a Jew could not agree with wholeheartedly. Every prayer, every concept, every belief, the relationship with God, the return to God. If you took out the fact that Christians believe in a connection with God through Jesus, if you took that away, nothing that was said is anything a Jew wouldn't wholeheartedly agree. And when I listened to what the Muslim prayers were on Sunday, there was nothing there that a Jew could not agree with. So I really do think the more you know people, the more likely you will be to find out that there are a lot of good people around, and the worst incident of anti-Semitism in this country has shaken a lot of people. It has shaken me. This is not what this country is about. This country has a lot of its fringe, which is very vocal right now, but I do not believe it's the country. I believe that this country is essentially good and tolerant. I believe that this country believes in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. I believe that, for the most part, this country believes in the words that are on the Statue of Liberty, knowing that immigrants have entirely made up this nation. And do we need protections? Absolutely. But immigrants are important people. Anyway, that's my perspective, and maybe not endorsed by WPSL, Congregation H. Chaim, or the law. No, it's where I come from, and for those of you who listen, and some of you who call my office with legal issues, and a couple of you who retained the firm, and others who have considered it. The more you know about me, perhaps the better. And we do have a call. So before I get to my my legal area, we will take a call from Dan on line 1. Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I enjoy listening to you.
Thank
and
you.
You were dead on everything, right? I believe that in this country, acceptance of everything in life is the key, because if we go around judging everybody else, there's something wrong with me. So I keep an open mind. In other words, somebody different faith or different political issues. You can learn from people you don't like if you keep an open mind. And so, in other words, it always comes back to us. It's not them out there, it's me. So if something out there in the world that I don't agree with, then I have to take a good look, an open-minded look at everything that they're talking about and take away the good stuff. And the people that I dislike, I just say a prayer for them and I let it go. I don't carry that anger and hate and, if this person's a Democrat, I automatically don't like them, or if this is a Republican, I don't like. No. That's closed-minded. And that'll keep you in a very small room being like that.
I appreciate those sentiments. I agree with those sentiments. I like to believe that a lot more people than it seems right now have those sentiments, and I do think there are, but they get drowned out, except in times like this where people come out of the woodwork to help. And that's, out of any tragedy, that's, I guess, the good that can be taken. Out of this Pittsburgh tragedy, what happened? I mean, within hours, folks, the local mosque was engaged in a fundraiser with the goal of raising $50,000 to help the victims and their families.
Yeah.
They've raised over $100,000. Okay, I've listened to press conferences with one of the rabbis from the Tree of Life Synagogue and one of the Muslim leaders. I don't remember which one, but I remember hearing that, that they had a long-standing relationship long before this tragedy, which is great. And I remember hearing that they were available to help in any way, to bring food, to help somebody to a cemetery. If somebody was afraid to go out into the grocery store, they would go with them to the grocery store. This is neighbor helping neighbor without regard for who the neighbor is. And I hope that in our little community, in Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, whoever else can listen to me, Brazil.
Kirby, Shogachobi.
I always say, for those of you who are familiar with Fiddler on the Roof, which takes place in the little shtetl, which is what they called European towns, called Anatevka. I always say, in our little corner here of Anatevka, if we could just do it the right way, it will spread. And we can't necessarily, unless we run for Congress, we can't necessarily try to change things immediately from the macro level. But we can work to change things from the micro level. Wait a second, I was never very good in economics. From the micro level. And we change it tree by tree, next thing you know, we'll have a forest. So, Dan, I agree with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, just remember that united we stand, divided we fall.
Amen.
Okay?
Amen.
Amen, brother. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Well, that warms my heart. It really does. And, Dan, if you're still on, hey, come on down to Congregation H. Chaim tonight or tomorrow. You're welcome. And, anybody is welcome. But thank you for your sentiments. It's really appreciated. So let's talk about a legal issue, several of them. Initially, I planned on going into a straight legal issue which really related directly to my practice, which, is what one would think would really help me most. But I've often detoured based upon what's going on in the country at the time.
We'll sneak a little promo for the practice every once in a while, right?
Well, I will.
Okay.
And, hey, everybody, gonna call Cheryl. She's not busy at all.
She's doing nothing.
781-8003. If you don't want to chat here, you want to chat longer, 15, 20 minutes about a possible claim you have, give her a call. She'll chat with you. She'll chat with me. then I'll chat with you, and we'll see what's what. And if you have a question here, just like Dan did, give us a call, 340-1590. I'd love to talk to you. Anyway, before I got into my strictly legal topic, this is a legal topic. It's constitutional law. And I do practice areas of constitutional law. I have often found myself involved in the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and the Eighth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Okay, First Amendment, we know freedom of speech, press, religion. Fourth Amendment is right to privacy. Eighth Amendment is cruel and unusual punishment. 14th Amendment makes all those amendments due process that are incorporated in the first 10 applicable to the states. So, there's some areas I don't do. I don't do the Fifth Amendment, right to counsel and right against self-incrimination. I'm not a criminal defense attorney. But there are plenty of constitutional amendments I do engage in my practice. So there are a few things that are in the news of late that I will try to stay as apolitical as possible, but it's hard. The first is the supposed executive order that will be possibly entered into that will revoke the birthright of citizenship for those born in this country whose parents either came in illegally or were undocumented. Now, I don't know how many of you, listen like I do to CNN, MSNBC, even occasionally Fox, just to hear what they're saying. Most people don't. But it ain't happening, folks. And if it does happen, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. And I dare anybody to honestly fight me over that. Let's have a debate. First of all, the Constitution vests executive power in Article 1. But it does not anywhere mention executive orders. So where do executive orders come from? They've been a normal part of presidential powers for quite a long time. So from where do they really emanate? Well, Article 2, Section 3 states that the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. In fact, most of you will recall, if you ever listened to an inauguration, that's part of the oath of office, faithful execution of the laws. This is our system. Congress passes laws. The president executes the laws. In case of a dispute, the judiciary interprets. Those are our checks and balances. That's how our country is organized. So, yes, the president shall take care to faithfully execute the laws. Now, executive orders are permissible in many respects. The president is entitled to enter into an executive order to direct his administrative agencies as to how to execute those laws. If he wants to issue instructions, they are issued in many respects through executive order. But executive orders cannot bypass actual legislation or constitutional principles. Now, the key question then, if that's the case, is whether an executive order which deals with the denial of birthright citizenship, which simply says, you're born here, you're a citizen. That's it. I mean, there are more sections to that constitutional provision than that, but that one section, that's really all it says. And in fact, 14th Amendment, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. It goes on to say, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States and deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law or against equal protection of laws. Now, there are a lot of constitutional provisions that are gray. This ain't one of them. Broken English intentional. All persons born in the United States are citizens of the United States. I call for anybody to debate me as to whether or not that's black or white. Now, okay, lawyers exist to fight things, and fights there have been. And this issue has come before the United States Supreme Court on 3 separate occasions. So what's happened? My goodness, it's so black and white. How could it go before the Supreme Court? Okay, well, let's see. By the way, the amendment was ratified in 1868, and that was during the Reconstruction era, and it overruled a Supreme Court case. The constitutional amendment overruled a Supreme Court case, which shows the power of constitutional amendments. It overruled the Dred Scott case, famous slavery case. And Dred Scott in 1857, the court held that descendants of slaves from Africa living in the United States could not be citizens. It is a black stain on Supreme Court history. But it was overruled by a constitutional amendment. So the court then had 3 opportunities to address what was the meaning of that constitutional amendment. In 1898, in United States versus Wam Kim Ark, in a 7-2 decision, Ark, who was a cook working in San Francisco, was born in California to non-citizen Chinese parents. He visited China in 1890 and was subjected to the loss of his citizenship under the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Supreme Court ruled, quote, "Citizenship by birth is established by the mere fact of birth," end quote. It held that Ark was a U.S. citizen, and it could not be taken away from him. Now, if you are naturalized, you come here, you go through the process, that citizenship can be taken away from you. If you're a natural-born citizen, if you are born here, a lot of things can happen to you, but your citizenship cannot be taken away from you. The next case was in 1980, a lot closer, in Vance versus Terraza, and the issue was whether a Mexican immigrant born in the United States who renounced his own citizenship when he returned to Mexico lost his citizenship. And the court said, quote, "In establishing loss of citizenship, the government must prove an intent to surrender United States citizenship, not just the voluntary commission of an expatriating act such as swearing allegiance to a foreign nation." In other words, he went back and said, I'm Mexican.
Okay, but wouldn't he have to then apply for citizenship there?
Like, I don't know. I don't know Mexican law.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay? But what the court was saying is, unless you actually go back, and I probably mischaracterized that in the beginning, unless you go back and you take affirmative steps to clearly renounce your American citizenship, you're giving it up. The mere fact that you say, even if we don't accept, let's say, dual citizenship in certain situations, and some we do.
Right.
But, if there's certain countries we may not accept dual citizenship. You go back and you swear citizenship to this country. That alone isn't good enough to take away your American citizenship. You have to clearly renounce your United States citizenship. And in the most recent case in 1982, in Plyler versus Doe, the court struck down a Texas law that withheld funding for the schooling of children of immigrants living in the United States unlawfully. Now, it said that the last clause of the first section of the 14th Amendment prohibits states from denying, quote, to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, end quote. So even if those children their parents aren't citizens of the U.S., an undocumented immigrant is still a person as entitled to equal protection of the law. So even there, which was more attenuated to citizenship, this was about whether or not you can go to school, not even being a citizen. The court is using the 14th Amendment to say, no, the states cannot deprive you of those privileges by merely being here. So most people that I have listened to in any of the 3 major cable news networks agree that this concept of an executive order to renounce birthright citizenship is not only dead on arrival if it's ever executed, but that the president doesn't really mean it. It's for politics. It's for the election. And it's unfortunate, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe he'll enter the executive order. Who knows? But there are a lot of people, a lot of very good people who are saying that they don't even believe he means it.
Okay, let's just say that he does, and I think he probably will. Would it then have to go to the Supreme Court? Because...
Well, what would happen is it would immediately be challenged.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
There would be an application filed in a federal district court, which would immediately win. Get summary judgment on the pleadings, whatever they want to call it. Immediately they'd win. And so the government would have to take it up on appeal to the Court of Appeals. I am virtually certain that in most courts of appeals they'd immediately win. And then they'd have to challenge it to the United States Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court either say, we're not hearing the case, which means the lower court decision stands and the executive order is no good.
Right.
Or we'll hear the case and then we'll rule on it and we'll issue an opinion.
Will they go back to these other times where it has been brought up? And
excellent question, and this is the concern of a lot of people that are worried about Roe versus Wade, and I among them.
I think that genie's out of the bottle. I mean,
well, I believe that with a likely 5-4 court in many respects now, I believe that Roe versus Wade is severely at risk despite the prior precedent. However, Roe versus Wade's a little bit different in that it is an emotionally charged issue and has been for decades.
But the science behind it. I mean, we've been doing it for a long time. How do you take that away?
You mean science or the precedent?
I mean, we're calling it...
We can debate science.
We're calling it medical.
We can debate science, and we can debate, when a fetus becomes a person.
Maybe, but see, now that's the thing. Maybe there should be guidelines.
But we're not talking about abortion's an illustration. There's not abortion discussion.
Yeah, but I don't think that you can take that back. I just really...
Well, and I'm afraid it will. I'm afraid it will disappear.
Americans aren't going to let that happen.
Well, then I hope if the court decides 5-4 that Roe versus Wade's overruled, I hope that the public storms the court.
I think they should have more current things to worry about.
But when you talk about an issue more like U.S. citizenship, it's as important, but it's not as emotionally charged. I believe that history has shown the courts will look at precedent and rely upon it much more closely because it is a significant aspect of American jurisprudence that you look at precedent and you follow it. Now, are there situations in our history? Many. Where the Supreme Court has overruled or reversed prior decisions it has issued? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's because later on, a generation later, the new court realizes, boy, they were wrong. I mean, Dred Scott, descendants of slaves can't be citizens. Yeah, that certainly was a decision that needed to be overruled. Okay? There are others, that had to do with integration, busing. Times change and you realize certain things. And when the Supreme Court overrules prior precedent, it typically goes to great pains in the primary opinion, in concurring opinions, and even in the dissents to explain the precedent and to explain why we're overruling it, or in the dissent, why we're opposing overruling it, or vice versa if it's not being overruled. I happen to think that this issue, and most people think this issue is clearly dead on arrival, and that even Congress would stand up and scream because it's not just a constitutional amendment. There is a provision of the U.S. Code that says the following shall be nationals and citizens of the United States at birth. Section 1, a person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So you have a congressional statute.
They never went to whether or not the parents were here legally.
No.
It's not in there.
No. We have a simple, basic, immutable fact about citizenship here. Born here, citizen here.
Now, here, okay, let's go to. I mean, we all know there are hotels that house women. Doctors care for those women so that their babies can be born in America.
Okay.
Okay, that happens. We know that happens.
Okay.
So mom gets deported.
Okay.
Baby should go with her, and baby should be a citizen and come back at 18, because technically that's her baby. What do we do about that?
I would not necessarily.
What do we do about that?
Well, that's an issue of practicality, and I don't know that I necessarily dispute that, unless there's a really close relative and the mom wants the baby to stay here. That baby's a citizen.
As a mom, I find that like a horrific idea.
Hey, look, come on. There are moms that will sacrifice their lives for their children. I do not find it hard to believe that there are moms in situations throughout this world who, to get their baby American citizenship, will then be risk subject to being deported without their child, to leave their child here, hopefully with a relative, to raise them and have a better life. I don't find that hard to believe at all. I find it tragic,
yes,
but I don't find it hard to believe. The big argument that I hear conservatives make is that, oh my goodness, it's called anchor babies. All right, we're going to come here, and this baby will be an American citizen, and in 21 years when the baby is a legal adult, the baby will sponsor me, the parent, to be an American citizen.
But that's really not how it happens. What happens
21 years later?
The baby stays, the mom stays, the dad stays, grandma stays, aunt stays, uncle stays, all the cousins stay.
Only because of because of the porous immigration policy. There does need to be a revision of immigration policy, and Republicans and Democrats have tried to do that for eons. We have Terry on line 1. Hello, Terry. How can I help you?
Hello. I'd like to talk about two things. The first one is babies being born in America. You tell us about the past, which are accurate, but the question is, what are we going to do about the future? My opinion would be have medical trailers outside the border and just rush the pregnant woman over, the reason being she might die.
Well,
no care. That's the first one.
That's more of a political issue that, I'm sort of not giving an opinion on right now, because I'm really talking more about the constitutional issue. That's an issue of practicality and how we're going to deal with immigration and protecting our borders, which I agree is an important issue.
Okay.
But if they're born here,
is, pardon me?
I'm just saying, if the baby is born, if anybody is born, well, I guess it's the baby if you're born here. If the baby is born here, they're a citizen. That's the constitutional provision. So thanks very much for calling, and I appreciate you listening. I'm going to go to Dan on line 1.
It's Bulldog.
Oh, Bulldog on line 2.
Bulldog, go ahead. You're on.
Bulldog? Ruff! Ruff! Bulldog. Okay.
I've got nothing on that line at all. So
And is Dan on line 1?
No, you had Dan earlier.
Oh, I had Dan earlier. I'm sorry. My mistake.
So,
all right. So
Bulldog, are you there? Okay.
maybe he'll call back. I always like talking to Bulldog. So let's move to the next one, okay? The next one is there's an executive order that President Trump is going to send 15,000 troops to the southern border to deal with this caravan that's on its way.
Aren't they already on their way?
15. Well, the caravan's on its way.
Like the first couple thousand.
Oh,
have
sure.
already, yeah.
Sure, but 15,000? Army troops?
It's a big border.
Well, let's look at the Constitution.
Okay.
Okay? He can't do it. He can send military troops to assist, to advise, but not to engage American citizens. And there may be American citizens engaged on the border because they're going to be protesters. You cannot risk having American military engaging American citizens. And it's part of the Constitution. And in fact, it's also part of the United States statute. 18 U.S. Code Section 1385, use of Army and Air Force as what's called posse comitatus. If any of you loved watching The West Wing, you may remember the posse comitatus episodes. And it basically says, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution, anyone who willfully uses any part of the Army or the Air Force as a posse comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 2 years or both. Felony. You cannot use American troops against American citizens. Can't even risk it. Because if you think you're just going to engage that caravan, and you get American citizens trying to help the caravan, then you got American military opposing American citizens. And you can't do it. It's against the law.
So if in that, let's just say it's whatever county, the sheriff's department is on hand.
Right.
And the sheriff's department engages the citizens.
That's okay.
Okay.
That is not the United States military.
Okay.
It's not the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. In fact, what aspect is permitted? The National Guard. See, the National Guard is not technically military. It's the National Guard. Now, in recent days, in recent years, National Guard's been called up to do all sorts of important work in far-flung places. But that's when you help. In hurricanes, disasters, a state governor
But they're
asks
called
the
into
president
action.
to call up the National Guard.
They're called into action by the governor.
Sometimes with a request to the president, depending upon what you need.
But they wouldn't have to. That governor.
Well, the governor has certain control over the National Guard, but not complete control.
If they don't agree with the president, then they're not going to do it.
Perhaps. Anyway, we have Jeff on line one. How can I help you, Jeff?
Sure, tell me what you would do. What would you do?
In what respect?
If you were President Trump right now and you had this onslaught of these people coming at you who throw rocks at your military that's trying to stop you from entering their border, that tear down walls that you put up.
What walls? What walls? What walls?
Did you not see that they took down that whole chain fence and they all came through there like
fence?
a bunch of
Yeah,
ants
okay, a
going up the
fence.
hill?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if they do that and they start coming in, how would you stop them?
Once they come in, they get arrested.
Okay, you got 20,000 people coming at you. Who's going to
So
arrest
call up
them?
the National Guard. That's
You
what
got
it's.
20,000 people. You
Call-
don't have 20,000 national.
Well,
Guard,
I don't
I'm
think there are
afraid.
20,000 people in that caravan. That's the number I've heard is 2,000.
Now, that's a deflated value.
Okay, well,
And then
there
there's
are.
three of them out there. 3 caravans
There's
out there now.
different caravans.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
there's 3 different ones out there now. If you look at that mass of people coming across that bridge, which was a picture taken by God knows who, there's quite a few people there. And nobody's got an answer. Everybody's got a comment. And what I'm upset about is if we got all these comments, why don't we have
all right.
an answer?
You asked me a question. If I am president address, which I never thought would be possible.
I like the way that sounds, Stuart.
Well,
win. So
if
you
I
might
never-
be in trouble, Stuart.
I never thought it would be possible, but given that we have a President Trump, maybe there could be a president address. I don't know, but it wouldn't be me. Maybe my son. Okay, I would probably, without knowing all the intricacies of the law, I would probably call out the National Guard in substantial numbers. I would have immigration and customs enforcement available. I would have set up processing units right inside our border. I would arrest people and detain people as they came across, and then I would process them because those who are coming
All right, with
are
a
going to
crowd
be
mass
requesting
that
asylum.
size, how do you handle when the crowd goes to a stampede? Because that's what they're doing. They get to the
Okay,
border, they get
if you
crowded
have
up, and they
enough-
stampede across. Much
if-
like we used to do at a concert. We know all of us wouldn't get in, but a few of us might. You know what I'm saying?
But we know it's happening. So if you have enough troops, National Guard, and you have enough immigration and customs enforcement, and enough sheriff's department, and enough local police, if you plan effectively, then you should be able to handle whatever numbers you know are coming. My only point is you can't use the military. It's not allowed. It violates the Constitution. It violates congressional statute.
With the purpose they can't defend the country?
You cannot use American military where American military inside the country may be engaged in actions against U.S. citizens.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If the Russians hit the damn ocean, came right up on the shore, or the Japanese, like they did during Bataan, and came up on the shore and started charging.
You mean a
up, what do we
declaration
do?
of war? You mean an
never.
act of war?
We weren't told that. We
I know.
weren't told that.
Whoa. Jeff, who cares if we were... Jeff.
We weren't told
Who
that we were
cares?
declaring war
If the
against them.
Japanese are bombing Pearl Harbor, I don't need to be told we're at war. I'm going to
That's
engage
what
the
I'm trying to say.
military.
We are at war right now.
No, we're not. I'm sorry.
You do not see it, but it's coming, dude.
Maybe, but I don't see it. You're right,
When
and
they start
we are not at
throwing
war.
rocks And they start taking clubs and they start coming across that. That's
That's
gonna be
violence.
war.
It's not war.
That many people, and there's going to be some of them that have guns, and somebody's going to
You're
get
right.
shot,
You're
and
right.
it's going to be a mess.
You're right.
A
That
mess.
part, it will be a mess.
Where's the freaking wall at to stop this nonsense? All right. I'll let
All
you go.
right. Thanks very much for your comments. I appreciate it. I do. I don't agree with it, but I appreciate it. And, that's my whole point, earlier. I mean, let's debate this stuff and,
I mean, knowing that, you found that information. You gotta think that, of course, our military has that information. The generals and the
I would
guys in
think
charge,
the CIA
and they know
the
that.
NSA and the DIA and all these other acronyms that you haven't even heard of.
They may draw a line in the sand, and the Americans on our side will not be allowed in that area. I mean, who knows what their plan might be? Maybe this caravan won't even make it all the way.
That's
It
possible.
may just be that people are collecting together for the pictures.
Oh, come on.
They're walking
you're not,
somewhere.
You're not one of those, are you really? Come on. You're not one of... No. You're not one of those who believe that mothers with ill children, mothers with tiny little babies, that they're there for a friggin' picture. Come on. Tell me you don't believe that.
They're giving out $100 bills.
Oh, my goodness.
That picture made it on the news.
I'm gonna fall over in my chair
You
in
didn't
this radio
see the dude
station.
passing out the $100 bills.
So some dude's passing out $100 bills, and so there's...
I'd walk 20 miles for $100.
Maybe there's 20 or 50 or 100 people of this caravan that are, illicit in that regard. But come on, don't strike with a broad brush what needs to be scalpeled out. That is not what the caravan is all about.
So hard to believe that they're walking all
you
that
find it hard
way.
to come on. You find it hard
All
to believe.
that way.
If you're coming from a country where your village has been destroyed, all right, the rebels are in control. They're conscripting.
But
they're conscripting young males into the revolutionary military. They're not all coming from Mexico.
But
they're coming from all sorts of places.
They're putting themselves in danger.
That's right. And what did we do when we came to America from England? And we came to these colonies, and then we decided, we're going to fight Great Britain. Oh, that is a really smart idea.
It worked out.
Yeah, but we were desperate, weren't we? We felt that it was worth the risk. So you're telling me that there aren't mothers and fathers, if the fathers are still alive and haven't been killed, from various parts of this world who aren't trying to escape not only to this country, but to other countries to save their very lives and to save their children's lives.
They're walking thousands of miles.
Not every day. I think they're going to stop and they're going to rest and they're going to get water and they're going to sleep. not in the Trump hotel.
Well, who's feeding them?
I'm sure there's assistance and I'm sure it's subsistence. I don't think they're getting fed every night filet mignon.
But that's what I'm saying. How can you make this trek?
Look at history. Look at history. Look at what has happened so many times in other countries.
I mean, yes, immigrants made this. They came on
boats.
boats.
Not even coming
they
here.
ended up at Ellis Island. They were processed.
All right, but let's forget that for a moment. Let's talk about recent history, where you have nations under attack from within their own nation, and you have military juntas that are going out and killing everybody that doesn't believe what they believe or doesn't look like they look or taking all the young boys and conscripting them into the army. And so people start trying to escape, to go to the nearest border, whatever the heck country that is, they figure is better than what we got here. And they're not willing to walk miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, even if it kills them.
But if they leave Honduras and they walk into Mexico, now you're in a safer place.
Yeah, and maybe you still want... Well, Mexico isn't the safest place in the world.
Exactly, but...
So maybe the goal is to get to the United States, a good old US of A. It was certainly the goal back in the 1940s and 50s. A lot of people came here. A lot of people escaped here. A lot of people came here with only the clothes on their back. A lot of people came here with $1 in their pockets, if that much. Okay? I refuse to accept that because some people may be play acting, that this is not real. That there isn't a depth of humanity that is suffering and trying to get to a better place. Now, does that mean they're all entitled automatically to come into our country and stay? No, it doesn't. But under our laws, if they have the right, the legal right, and meet the standard to get asylum, then it does mean they get to come here. And on that point, we have John on line 1. Hello, John.
Hi. I'll be quick. I know we don't have much time left.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. We don't. 2 minutes.
We're close to the end. What I was going to say is I'm not a Trump supporter. It's no secret. To me, he's controlling. He's loose cannons. He's the closest thing to a dictator, and those are his good points. First of all, he said, and I heard him say this, that if the immigrants throw rocks, they're going to be dealt with as if they had rifles.
Well, that's Trumpian, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I understand. We don't need 7,000 or 20,000 coming here illegally. We've been dealing with that. But, I mean, in addition to what they're leaving and how desperate they are, just imagine coming here knowing that Trump is here.
Yeah, right.
And
they're still doing it.
Yeah. I guess death is worse than what they're dealing with. I mean, in their minds,
And I agree with you, John. I gotta sort of sign off. I have a minute.
Of course.
Thank you for calling. I appreciate it, and I agree with you.
I appreciate you and your program.
Thank you very much, folks. We're about winding down. So of course, if you would like to call my office, it's 781-8003. And let me just leave this with: let's be tolerant. Let's get to know people. It'll be better for us and better for our nation. Thank you, and this is Ask a Lawyer. I'll talk to you next Friday.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.